Vikings tried to do some things to address their offensive line. So I don't think those are excuses you can use to just bail Cousins out. He was supposed to be a massive upgrade over what they had in Case Keenum. I mean, that's what we were sold by the Vikings, that they have to have this guy. It makes them a Super Bowl contender. They're not a Super Bowl contender. There is no way right now that they can compete with what the Saints are doing and the Rams are doing. So I put a good bit of the blame on Cousins because in that game on Sunday night, Eric, that pick six that he threw was on him. That's a horrible throw. In that moment, he threw the game away. It was 14-6. That made it 20-6 and gave the Bears a chance for two. They convert, and it's 22-6. Now you're down 2 touchdowns and two-point conversions at that point on the road. He threw them out of that game on Sunday night. There's been other games this year. You think about that game they had in Minnesota versus the Bills where they just got hammered. Again, both sides of the ball didn't look very good, but when you get paid the type of money he's getting paid, your fan base is going to expect a lot out of you. And you have to be ready if you're going to ask and command that type of price tag that you're going to have to perform to the expectations or you're going to expect to get hammered. It's as simple as that in this league. It's the same thing we talk about with other guys like Matthew Stafford, for example, that gets big money. And we put a lot of expectations on him. Kirk Cousins can't dodge this. And you go back to our preview show, we talked about it then. I brought up the fact that in Washington, he was a guy that would put up big stats in games, but if you really watch the game in the fourth quarter, Cousins made a lot of mistakes. Everybody thinks about you like that stuff, but there's a lot of games, Eric, that he threw late interceptions. He didn't convert on third down. He'd throw the ball away on fourth down in games that they needed, and he just didn't have it all the time for them. They didn't have a lot of success even in Washington, and everything always got blamed on someone else. At some point, it has to come back on Kirk Cousins. It feels like that tide is starting to swell with him where there's a lot of people that are getting frustrated with him that he has a fully guaranteed deal and he is not living up to it right now. One guy that is living up to the expectation is Mitchell Trubisky. We talked about him in the preview show if he was ready to step up this year. He's got the Bears at 7-3. Eric, not a big surprise to you. You really like the Bears. I don't know if you like them enough to think that 10 games in, they would be leading this NFC North division. But with what you've seen from the Vikings and the Packers, and we'll throw the Lions in there as well, can the Bears hold on and win this division?
Two of the most exciting things to watch the other night in prime time during that game were Khalil Mack and Mitchell Trubisky. I stand behind what I said at the beginning of the season, that the Bears are going to shock people, and they will. Because they will, Justin, win this division. Now, they're not going to win it going away, but after what you just said about the Vikings, which I agree with, and what the Packers are doing at 4-5, which is kind of a mystery, I think the Bears can wrap this division up if they stay in their lane. Mitchell Trubisky made the gains that I thought he would make. That was kind of more of my point at the beginning of the year, is that I more thought that the Bears just wouldn't be as bad as everyone thought they would be coming off of the season prior. They weren't giving Mitchell enough credit for how much he was going to jump in that subsequent year of his career. And you're seeing that. You're seeing him become a much better quarterback, especially on the ground. He makes nice decisions. He leaves the pocket when he needs to, and he's got some wheels when he needs to. I thought he was really electrifying to watch, not on the level of Goff and Mahomes, that type of electrifying, but certainly an offense that the Bears haven't had for a while, especially when you throw in Cohen and what he can do from the backfield. Now, aside from that, Khalil Mack is probably the other reason that this team can win the division. I wasn't really in favor of the Bears giving up what they gave up. I think I was on record as saying that I thought the Raiders actually won that deal based on the fact that they unloaded a bunch of salary, unloaded a player that wasn't happy, and got some picks. I think I'm wrong on that. I think the Bears got the better of this deal because Khalil Mack just leaves that defensive line like he's shot out of a cannon. There's no one that can stop him. I mean, when he's throwing 300-pounders to the ground with one arm and still getting to the quarterback, he is incredibly entertaining to watch. And that Bears defense was really tough. I mean, him and everyone else, they played so tough. And so if they can keep that up and Mitchell Trubisky can keep his head on straight for the rest of the year, this team is going to win that division.
They're in a great position. Now, look, Trubisky's got a shoulder injury. He's day-to-day. You talked about the top of the show. We're recording this on Tuesday night. So the Bears play the early game in Detroit. And it's the first time, I believe, in NFL history you've had a team that's played on a Sunday night and then has to travel on a Thursday to play a 12:30 p.m. game or whatever the time will be there in Detroit Central Time on the East Coast.
And that's just awful.
So that's not a good thing in terms of schedule. And if Trubisky can't go, then you're depending on Chase Daniel. Look, he's been with Matt Nagy for a while, so they know each other. He knows his style. They were with each other in Kansas City for 3 years, but that'll be a tough spot for them. And that's a game versus a 4-6 Lions team that with Trubisky, you would think that they could win. They come back, then they'll have 10 days rest, then they get the Giants, then they'll face the Rams. You have to think that's a loss. And then, Eric, it's really controlling their own destiny at that point. Can they, at home, take care of Green Bay? Then they'll head to San Francisco. They should win that game, and then they'll finish up with the Vikings. So they're really in the driver's seat right now. You'd have to think they're probably going to drop the Rams game, but they have 5 other games that they should win, or at least win 4 of those 5. And if they do that, there's not really a path that the Vikings could catch them at this point unless the Vikings can win out, and that would include beating Chicago at the end of the year. So Chicago's really put themselves in a very good position right now. So that division is pretty interesting, but I don't think anything's quite as interesting or quite as messy as this NFC East division, Eric. I feel like it changes week to week. The narrative changes week to week on what we are looking at. This week, it's changed pretty dramatically as division-leading Washington not only lost to the Texans, but they lost their starting quarterback, Alex Smith, to a pretty gruesome leg injury. He is out for the year. The Redskins will turn it over to Colt McCoy. You've had Dallas win 2 straight road games. These 2 teams will match up in the 4:30 spot in Dallas on Thanksgiving Day. So Eric, Dallas now finds themselves just 1 back of Washington. Can the Redskins hold on to this division with Colt McCoy, or is Dallas your favorite to win this NFC East?
Unfortunately, it's a simple answer. Yeah, I think Dallas wins this division now. I think it's just circumstantial. The Eagles are playing terrible. They're losing games they shouldn't lose, and that's going to continue to happen. I wouldn't say they shouldn't have lost to the Saints because we called that, and we actually said it was going to be a blowout, and sure enough, it was. So the Eagles are falling off. They're not going to be a contender now in this division. That leaves it up to Washington and Dallas, and then Washington suffering a major loss with an Alex Smith, and they just don't have that many pieces to where a Colt McCoy can come in and keep them together. I think Dallas takes first place as of Thursday because they beat Washington. They'll both be at 6-5 at that point with Dallas leading the division. And then from there, I think it's all things looking up for the Cowboys. So who would have thought 3 or 4 weeks ago that we'd be saying these Cowboys are the ones that are going to lead and win this division? But I am predicting at this point that that is exactly what we're going to see, because I think the loss of Alex Smith is just too large for a team like the Redskins to overcome. They were right on the cusp of being just better than mediocre anyway, kind of leading a division based on the fact that the other 3 teams were really not sure what the heck's going on. And now you have the Eagles being terrible. And so I think the path is paved for the Cowboys.
We talked about how decimated Washington was, and you saw it finally catch up to them on Sunday with their offensive line, the injuries they've had. And Eric, it really only takes one play where someone misses a block, someone misses an assignment, and your quarterback takes a hit like Alex Smith did, and you get that type of injury. Most of the time, they're not that severe in nature. It could be a shoulder or a concussion or something like that. This one just happened to be a season ender and possibly a career ender for someone like Alex Smith. But you just can't go through with just patchwork offensive lines when you play teams that can get after your passer, because, again, it's just one play sometimes where you miss a block. And even though the NFL is trying to protect these quarterbacks, they can't protect them from everything. They can't protect them from the freakish nature of injuries like that. Look, if Dallas can't figure out a way to win this division, then they need to clean house for sure. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. If it was time for that, this division is as wide open as it's ever going to be. You've got the Eagles as the defending Super Bowl champions that are just lost right now. Washington is a mess with injuries, and they don't have a starting quarterback. If you're Dallas, with everything that you have going for you, you're relatively healthy. You went out and you added Amari Cooper. You find yourself only one back with a home game with Washington traveling on a short week. If they can't win that game and get a lead in this division, then yeah, Jason Garrett needs to be fired. They need to clean house and start over again, because it doesn't get any easier for them to win the NFC East than they have it this year. So I got to ask you, at 4-6, are you ready to bury the Eagles' playoff chances, or is there any hope for them?
No, they're done. The way they played against the Saints just told it all. I mean, we knew they were going to lose that game, but to lose it like that tells me that they're going to lose like that again when they play the Rams. So that would be their 7th loss, and that was if they don't lose to teams like the Texans or the Cowboys. You know, it's just, they're done. I mean, there's no path. And the problem is there's no path even to the wild card when you're looking at an 8-8 record in the NFC this year.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. I mean, they're almost going to have to run the table, it feels like. Now, they still do have 2 versus Washington, 1 versus Dallas, and they're only really 1 back of Dallas, and they have the Giants coming to Philly this weekend. So if they could find a way to turn it around, Eric, it's there in front of them. The division has not been run away with yet. As bad as they've been, they're only 2 back of Washington. And like I said, they've lost their starting quarterback in Dallas week in, week out. You don't know what you're getting from them. Plus, Dallas still has a game with the Saints coming up on a Thursday night. This weekend, you have the Giants who've won 2 straight coming into Philly. Does Philly win that game?
I don't know. I think there's a chance they don't. I mean, that's the crazy position that they're in right now. Their secondary is decimated. Now, look, I don't want to just be the guy that goes to the injury excuse. They are decimated with injuries in their secondary. That's a fact. So, anyone who wants to claim I'm a homer and all that stuff, you would be right. I am a homer, but you have to look at the facts, and they're decimated with injuries in the secondary. But you look at the linebackers and the line, and they're just not producing a pressure that's able to keep the other team's offense off the field and give the Eagles' offense a chance to score more points, although they haven't been very good at that either. So, yeah, I just think that this team is, they have a chance to lose against the Giants. To your point, though, if they were to somehow find magic in a bottle near the end of the year, basically the end of the year meaning starting right now, and win all of their remaining games except for the Rams game, and I still think they're going to lose to the Texans too, but let's say they beat the Texans and only lose to the Rams, then yes, then they do have a chance to win the division, because I do think they will beat Washington twice now. That's a big help. I don't think I was thinking that, last week when we knew Alex Smith was in. I was thinking maybe a split. Now with Alex Smith gone, I think Colt McCoy is a pretty significant downgrade. I think the Eagles can beat them twice. However, the Cowboys have a whole new motivation now. When they win this Thursday, I think they're looking up, and I think they just play with a totally different mindset. So to your point, I guess there's a path there mathematically, but it would be that they'd have to win all of their remaining games and only lose to the Rams, and I just don't see that happening because they could even lose this weekend to the Giants.
Well, the Panthers this Sunday actually helped the Eagles out by taking a loss and sort of keeping this wild card race, again, where the Eagles are only 2 back. Carolina had a chance to tie the game late versus Detroit, and they continued with a trend that we've seen and we've talked about now on several shows this year, this late game aggressive play calling now that we've seen at least 3 playoff contenders do. All 3 of them have lost the game. Carolina, the latest to do this on Sunday. Again, this game was 20-19. Carolina had a chance to kick the extra point to tie the game. They decided to go for 2. Cam Newton actually had someone wide open, made a horrible throw, way off target, incomplete. Carolina takes the loss in this game. Now, to be fair to Coach Ron Rivera, Graham Gano had struggled in this game. He had missed an extra point. He had missed a field goal from about the distance of an extra point. Tarek, do you agree with Rivera's decision to go for 2, or should he have gone for the extra point and played for overtime?
I totally disagree with what Ron Rivera did. He's a kicker. If he can't make kicks in the NFL, you deal with that after the game because you would lose anyway. But by going for 2 in a play like that and you don't get it, you also lose. So you have to trust your kicker. He's a football player that's hired to do one thing, and that's put the football through the uprights. If he can't do it, you deal with it later. However, they chose to take the risky play. It didn't pay off, and it's the 3rd time, like you said, that we've seen this, and it's something in the NFL that I just don't understand right now, because if you can extend the play on the field, especially with a guy like Cam Newton, you just have to take the odds there. And if you feel like the odds are that far against your kicker, that's a bigger problem.
I totally agree with you. You would think that these coaches would stop trying to mimic what Doug Peterson did in one play in the Super Bowl, that aggressive style, and start looking at what has happened to these teams that have gone for this. The Colts lost the game by trying to be aggressive and go for it on a 4th and 5 in overtime. You had the Titans trying to go for 2, and ultimately they lost the game. These teams are not in desperation mode enough where they have to have a win that badly. The Lions were without Marvin Jones in this game. They lost Kerryon Johnson in the game to a knee injury, so they were already wounded. Carolina just went down the field. Again, they kicked that extra point. They're on the road. They have all the momentum. I don't know why at that point you play, because what happens is if you don't get it, you have no time to get the football back to do anything. So I don't know why you don't play for a tie and go to overtime and hope that your defense can make a play or your offense can get the ball and go down and get a touchdown, and then it's game over. So, yeah, I don't agree with it at all. The whole thing about being on the road and going for 2, it just doesn't make any sense. If you're the Panthers, you had a chance to really separate yourselves for this wild card position.